Awesome. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Life Science Live. My name is Lauren, and today we are at our Life Submerged exhibit here at the Bee Museum, and we are going to talk about a really awesome habitat and one of my favorite biomes, which is wetlands. And wetlands are super important, and we're going to talk about why they're so important. But first, let's establish, everybody, what is a wetland? Because some people might not know. So, a wetland is an area where the soil has lots of water around it and in it. So, examples of wetlands can include lakes and rivers and marshes and swamps and tide pools, and they can be inland wetlands as well as coastal wetlands. That would include the tide pools, and they can be freshwater or saltwater. And you can be a saltwater wetland while still being an inland wetland. An example of that would be here in Utah, the Great Salt Lake is still a saltwater inland wetland. Okay, so wetlands are super awesome, and I'm sure as summer starts to pick up, we are all safely trying to get out to wetlands, to lakes, and trying to interact with nature that way. But we're going to talk about how important it is not only wetlands are, not only to our own personal recreation, but also to ecosystems. They're one of the most productive ecosystems in the whole world, rivaled only by coral reefs and rainforests. So they are, because they're so productive, they are in areas all over the world. They're on every continent except for Antarctica for temperature reasons, but they are so cool, and I'm going to talk about why they're so productive. So everybody at home, please think over in your head, why do you think wetlands are so productive? And when I say productive, it means that it can sustain life for lots of varieties of different animals because of the amount of resources available and the amount of animals that can make it its habitat, which is a large variety for wetlands. So wetlands are specifically super productive because of their ability to produce plant life. So primary producers, because there is so much water, which is something that plants desperately need, as well as nutrients from other animals living in that water, and from the sun, and from all kinds of other things that add to the nutrient level in the water. Lots of plants can grow in and around wetlands. So wetlands can have plants that are around its edges as well as that grow at the bottom of the wetland and that float on the top of the wetland, such as lily pads or different mosses, and all of that produces lots of food for our primary consumers, who are mainly herbivores, and they're small fish or mammals or some microorganisms as well. So as the wetland is able to produce lots of plant life, it's also able to fulfill the energy needs of a ton of small primary consumers, which then are able to transfer their energy as food to secondary consumers. So it can support larger animals like our friend the beaver here, as well as lots of reptiles like alligators and snakes, and it also supports lots of amphibians like salamanders and frogs, And wetlands provide a habitat for amphibians that are super important because amphibians can't live in that many places because of their need for constant moisture. So wetlands often are really important in ecosystems because they provide habitats that some animals can only live in wetlands, which is super interesting. Yeah, okay. But now that we've talked about its productivity, another thing that is really cool about wetlands is it has animals that form wetlands. So this guy, we're going to talk about the beaver. The beaver is a keystone species of wetlands. And the beaver is a keystone species is some animal that is helpful in the development of a habitat and an ecosystem because it lives there. It provides opportunities for lots of other animals to live there. And our friend the beaver here provides opportunities for other animals to live there by creating small wetlands as it makes a dam. So beavers create dams for their own personal safety, not for the safety of other animals, but by creating those dams, it affects those other animals. So its own safety, we're going to talk about that for a sec. The reason why the beavers create dams is because they have these webbed feet that don't help them, and a really long paddle-like tail that doesn't help them travel on land very well. So in order to avoid predators, what they want to do is they want their ecosystem to be water-based because that tail and those webbed feet help them to move around really quickly in water so they can evade predators easier. So in order to do that, they create dams, which are usually along a river, and it makes what scientists call a beaver pond. So it makes the river slow down, it's deeper, and I have a picture right here. And that's the beaver pond in the back behind the dam, and it makes the river slow down and become deeper, and the beaver is able to dive down and evade predators. And beavers can go underwater for 15 minutes without coming back up for air. So having a deeper area where they produce the beaver ponds is helpful to them because not that many predators can go underwater for 15 minutes and then still chase them and try and eat them. So that's helpful for the beaver, but how is the beaver dam helpful for other animals? So we already talked about how it slows down the river, and because it slows down the river, the dam collects lots of nutrients and lots of things that are within the water that help produce more plant life, which we talked about. Plant life is really important to other animals because they get to eat it, as well as that plant life is going to be storing lots of carbon. So that storage of carbon, and that's helped by the beaver dams, helps our whole entire Earth be less susceptible to that global warming as carbon is taken in instead of released into our atmosphere. It's stored, which is really important. As well as because it slows down the river, there's not as much damage to the river beds. The soil doesn't get as distraught, and also it is able to, because it's a slowed down river and it's a pond, it's able to house lots of areas where animals are able to reproduce. So an amphibian does not want to place its eggs in a rushing river, but an amphibian is more likely to place it in a slowed pond where it's able to allow those tadpoles to reproduce. or to grow, sorry. But yeah, that's a really big part of the beaver, and the beaver is very helpful. And also I have a picture. Not only do beavers produce the dam, they also make this right here, which is called a Beaver Lodge. And the Beaver Lodge is next to a dam usually, but it's on the side of a bank, and it's going to be a large dome of dirt that up to 12 beavers live in. So that would be two beavers that are a monogamous pair, and then their kids, so their children, are going to be living in that lodge. And most often beavers live in an area until there are no resources left, which usually takes a really long time if we as humans are being responsible with our resource consumption. So if we as humans are responsible with our resource consumption, beavers will live in the same area for their whole entire lifetimes and be important members of that ecosystem for the whole time, which improves our living because it cleans that water and it allows for more biodiversity, and it improves the ecosystem as a whole because it improves that biodiversity and more animals live there, and it's a healthier environment. So beavers are the best. We love beavers. And beavers illustrate one of the reasons why wetlands are important, because wetlands house 1/3 of all of endangered species live in wetlands. It's their habitat. Well, one of the reasons is because wetlands are going away, because lots of people don't understand that wetlands are a productive ecosystem. They think, oh, there's just a lot of water there, not that many animals live there, and so they think maybe we should drain it and we should make it available for human use a lot more. But instead, we have to have the mindset of this is an ecosystem that is housing lots of animals, and it's housing our endangered animals that we want to protect. So in order to protect that 1/3 of endangered animals, we have to be aware of wetlands in our area. For Utah, only 1% of Utah is wetlands, but 75% of those wetlands are the Great Salt Lake. So when we think about wetlands, we have to think about all the other animals that are contributing to those wetlands and be aware of them. Not only are there animals who live there year-round, like the beaver, but also there are animals like birds, like this mallard. I have a mallard right here. This guy. This mallard is going to be migrating and is dependent on wetlands in order to complete that migration, because like all of us, mallards and other birds need resources to move and to have energy. And so as it's flying thousands of miles, as it migrates, it's important that there are wetlands across all those landscapes in order for them to take part in those wetlands and gain some fish or some food or some water that's really important to the development of these birds and the development of their migration patterns as well. So everybody, what I want you to get from this conversation is that wetlands are a very important part of our world and of our ecosystems in most places, and we should protect them, and we should be aware of the impact that we can have on wetlands. If we produce lots of pollution, wetlands are usually the first ecosystems to feel it the most and to be degraded, and all the animals in wetlands are also the most susceptible to pollution. So as we think about how we can best be sustainable in our actions, we should think about how we can be helpful to our wetland habitats. And that's all. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope that as you interact with wetlands, you can remember some of the facts that I told you and love beavers because they're awesome. Okay, bye guys.